Hello, and welcome to the Media Copilot, a podcast that explores how AI is changing media, journalism, and content creation. I'm Pete Paschal, longtime tech journalist and founder of the Media Copilot, and I'm excited to bring you fascinating conversations with fellow journalists, media executives, and the people building all the ways we'll create and consume news in the future. Today, I'm especially excited to welcome the co-founders of Rolli, Nick Toso and Catalina Villegas. I always feel good when I see fellow journalists going out on their own to build something new, and that's exactly what Nick and Catalina are doing. Nick is the former Washington bureau chief from CNN, and Catalina has worked as a producer and anchor for TV news. And with Rolli, they're creating a set of tools for journalists to help them work faster while producing better work. Exactly what every newsroom is asking those journalists to do. Do more with less is a tired phrase, but that's because it's everywhere now. It's the rule, not the exception. How you do more with less doesn't get talked about as much, but Rolli has a lot to say about that. You need an expert-first story, fast? Rolli can help. You need to know if a viral story is true or not, or where it originated? Rolli can help. And if you don't actually have any money to pay for this service, Rolli can still help. I went deep on Rolli with Nick and Catalina for this discussion, but beyond the features of the service, I also put the focus on the forces in media that are putting services like Rolli in demand, including, what else? AI. It was a really fun conversation, and I hope you listen to the whole thing, since I don't shy away from asking them some tough questions about trust and bias that curated services like Rolli are often accused of. Hey, I'm a journalist too. In any case, if you do enjoy the podcast, I'd encourage you to share it with a friend or a colleague, and I'd be grateful if you consider subscribing to the Media Copilot newsletter if you have not already. I'd also really appreciate it if you'd leave a rating or review in whatever podcast app you're in. Those really do help the show get in front of more people. Lastly, you can check out everything we offer, including AI training classes for media, marketing, and PR professionals at mediacopilot.ai. Okay, enough with housekeeping. Now, here's my conversation with Nick Toso and Catalina Villegas of Rolli. Nick and Catalina, welcome to the Media Copilot.
Thanks so much for having us, Pete.
Awesome. Thanks for coming. So tell me all about Rolli. You're doing a lot of different things. You know, you're journalist, doing things for journalists, by journalists. I like the sound of that from the get-go. But, you know, how would you describe it in your in one sentence or your elevator pitch?
Well, Rolli is where journalists find experts, quite simply. We have a vetted database of experts, diverse experts from around the country and around the world that journalists can call on when they need to add some depth and clarity to their stories.
Cool. And I understand that's one of the things you do, but you also have some stuff that helps analyze information as it spreads, right? Yep. And is that, tell me about that.
Yeah. We have a tool that helps journalists identify inauthentic behaviors online. And what these inauthentic behaviors are is essentially coordinated campaigns to amplify content, which can often be disinformation. So the workflow that we've created on the platform allows journalists to find information on social media, vet if the information is legit or not, or arriving to you organically or inauthentically, and then tap a vetted expert to add clarity to that story. So it's a really great workflow for journalists seeking to, add a lot of depth to the reporting without basically rebroadcasting disinformation.
Okay, cool. So have we missed anything?
Yeah, I would like to add, Pete, that our platform is really, the vision of it is that it's going to be the newsroom of the future. And it is a platform that has a lot of different tools and features to help journalists do their work more efficiently, more productively, and in ways that really combat some of the current challenges that we're experiencing in the market today, whether that be the rise of disinformation, or the speeding up of the news cycle, or the challenges around diversity that we see so marked in newsrooms today when we're talking about the lack of diversity of experts quoted in the media. And so our Newsroom as a Service platform, outfitted with AI to really counter all the challenges that technology has brought us to this day.
Cool. So, all right. So let's start with the expert finder. Obviously, there's been services similar to this. There's Haro, help a reporter out. There's something called ProfNet. There's probably a few others that I'm not thinking of. What does Rolli bring to the table that these previous services and established ones don't?
Sure. I think that there's quite a few different points where we make our mark. And I'll start first off by the fact that Nick and I are both journalists. And so this is a tool that is created by journalists for journalists. It's not created by a PR company, or it doesn't have a particular objective except to help the journalists find the expert they're looking for. And that is very clear and different from a lot of the other tools out there. The other really big thing is that Rolli works with your workflow. One of the really big challenges around Haro, I think it was a great tool for some folks at a certain time, but I'm a broadcast journalist. I never use Haro. I've never heard Haro mentioned in my newsroom. And the reason for that is that Haro does not work at the speed of broadcast.
Hmm.
And so what we saw over and over again is that as the news cycle sped up and as broadcasters and TV folks had to do more content more quickly, a lot of these tools were not functional. And then finally, one other really big point of differentiation is the vetting. We have a vetted database of experts. Not just anyone can come on Rolli. The idea is that we do a lot of the background check and a lot of the vetting of these experts before they get on the platform. So for the journalist, it's a much more trusted search instead of doing a search out in the kind of open Google, if you will.
Yeah, tell me more about that. So you mentioned, obviously this is that you do a vetting process. I'd like to know a little bit more about that. Like, how can journalists sort of trust that they are getting someone that is, truly an expert, and also that there isn't necessarily some bias in the process, right? That there is that the filtering that you guys are doing is judging these guys on their expertise alone, and doesn't have some other kind of sort of factors involved.
Yeah, that's a great question. And honestly, it's I think one of the most important ones. But at the heart of it, Rolli is a meritocracy. And the idea is that we're helping journalists find the people that they need for that particular story and the best experts that they need for that story. And the reason why that's important is because we've seen over the years how the speeding up of the news cycle has made it harder and harder for journalists to find the perfect expert for their story. And I'll give you some examples. During the COVID pandemic, we saw that at times journalists had to turn to doctors that weren't specialized in infectious diseases, weren't specialized in virology. Instead, they were maybe emergency room physicians, or maybe they had other types of expertise, but they were in a pinch and a bind and they needed someone to comment, and so they bring that person on. We see that happen very often across the country for a lot of different stories. And oftentimes when the journalists can't find the expert that they're looking for, they end up then just killing the story as well, which is also not good because it means that that community suffers because they didn't receive the information they needed. And so for us, our goal here is to really help journalists quickly identify the top experts for their stories that they're currently working on, and get to those people quickly so they can meet their deadline. Now, on the other side of that, you asked about the vetting process, which is an important part of what we do. Not anyone can actually come on Rolli. And we have a 7-step process that was developed and is actually visible on our website. It's a combination with the Pointer Center and Associated Press. And you can see the kind of vetting that we do in the step-by-step process that we undergo. The most important part here as well, Pete, when we're talking about all these different kind of our processes and all of that, is that we're very intentional about who we invite to come onto the platform and then who we allow to come onto the platform at the end of the day if they're coming to us organically, because we want it to be a trusted source for journalists. Not to say that there aren't a lot of different opinions on the platform. We're not looking for one particular opinion or one particular way of thinking. But we do want to make sure that the people that are coming on are working for trusted organizations, and their credentials check out.
Well, it's interesting. So you mentioned earlier that they were, you lost you. All right, we might have to do some. Oh, there you go. Welcome back. You mentioned earlier that you have you think about diversity as you think about the experts that you have on your platform. This is a time, obviously, when there's a sort of a lot of mistrust in the media.
Yeah.
How do you balance that idea of like, well, we want to have diverse voices on this platform, but you said it's at heart of meritocracy, right? So, there's a lot of backlash these days, at least in some areas, on around DEI and those kind of priorities. I mean, how do you think about that, and how do you sort of present yourself? How does that affect the process and how you present yourselves?
I really appreciate that question. As a Latina, as an immigrant, as a woman, this is such an important topic. And let me give you two kind of points to this that I think are important, and then I'll toss it over to Nick because I do think he has a really interesting background when it comes to this particular topic of diversity. There are Black doctors, Latino scientists, female rocket scientists, incredible people, and there is diversity within every different field. What we don't have as journalists is an easy way to find these folks and an easy way to find the folks that are in these fields that want to be in the media and want to contribute to the media. And so one of the things that we see over and over again is that a lot of newsrooms have these incentives and these desires to bring a little bit more diversity in terms of the people that they're quoting on air. The reason for that is that about 5% of the STEM experts quoted in 2021 when it came to COVID were women. That's abysmal. That's awful, right? And so we know that there is a need to find more diversity in terms of the experts that are quoted in the media, but there's no easy way for us to do that. And so that's why we undertake this task and in this business to try to bring more diversity. And we do it through a lot of different ways by trying to recruit folks from these communities by engaging in partnerships. For example, we're in the process of finalizing one of these with some incredible national Hispanic organizations, and to just try to let these folks know that there is a way for them to get their word out, for them to be seen and be recognized. They just need an easy way to do that, and our platform is one of those ways.
Yeah, and I'll just add, as Catalina alluded to earlier, there's a lot. There are plenty of qualified experts out there. They're just busy being experts. They're not paying for PR. They're not optimizing SEO, so you won't find them on the first 3 pages of Google. There are plenty of experts out there available, and plenty of diverse experts. Now, when we talk about diversity, we're not just talking about ethnic or cultural diversity. We're talking about diversity of experiences, diversity of education. Diversity is a much broader term than what the U.S. Census will let us believe it is. So I think that when we look at diversity, we're not just looking at it through the lens of your race or your gender. We're looking at the lens of the diversity of the experience. Where are you working? What have you done? What research have you done? For us at Rolli, you are just as credible an expert if you've been on the ground working with homelessness in LA for 20 years or in the world's leading think tank for 20 years. We value both of those experiences. And it's up to the journalist to make the call who the right expert is for that story. But through our vetting process, we will guarantee that expert is who they say they are, that their credentials check out, and that you can book with confidence on the platform.
So how does it work as a person using the platform then? So if I go in, okay, I need someone who's an expert on nuclear power plants. And is it essentially like a Google SERP where you have like 10 or 20 links, or are they ranked in a particular way? Are there follow-up questions to get even narrower in that field of expertise? that, I assume there's some kind of tagging that would be involved here. What happens when I go and I have this deadline, I have a story, what do I get?
Yeah, it's a great question. There's essentially two ways you can go around it. One is you can visit our website. We're a closed system, and so journalists must be credentialed journalists in order to join the platform. The reason for that is that a lot of the folks and experts on the platform are incredible subject matter experts, and so they don't necessarily want their information floating around. And so what they want is to be contacted by journalists. So once a journalist logs in, they can essentially do a search for a particular term, right? So they do this search, and they're going to get a breakdown of the top 6 to 8 experts immediately off the bat. And the AI is going to provide analysis as to why it recommended that particular expert. So our AI goes deep into our system and into the profiles and reads all the backgrounds and all the bios and all the keywords and all the expertise and education. And then it says, for this particular query, for this particular search, here are some possible candidates that we think match well with what you're looking for. And so the journalist can then go into each profile and read more about that particular expert. Now, the journalists, we know that there's so many different categories and specifics when we're looking for experts. And so what we've added as well is a lot of filtering that a journalist can do. So for example, I used to work at Univision for like the longest time. And for me, having a Spanish speaking expert was incredibly important, but also so hard to find. Like if it's hard to find English speaking experts by deadline, it's nearly impossible to find Spanish speaking experts, right? And so what we've seen is that we've experienced a lot of growth with the Spanish speaking news stations because they can just simply go in and then filter by language, right? And say, I need someone who's fluent in Spanish. And then they'll get, that kind of list will be narrowed down to the Spanish speaking experts, and on and on. I need someone in Tulsa, or I need someone who's working in the East Coast or the West Coast. I need someone who is doing this particular work. That can all be narrowed down within the platform with our AI.
Yeah.
Free idea. You could compare the expert search with an AI translation. Microsoft and others have done a lot of good technology around real-time translation. And then the language barrier, I wouldn't say disappears, but it certainly goes down a bit.
It's so funny you say that, because I was the moment I heard about, and I'm gonna mess up the name, but was it Jenny, or it's this tool that you speak in you like record 30 seconds in one language and it'll translate it for you in a different language. I think it's called Jenny or something like that. But I thought it was really cool, because as someone who struggled for many, many years with English sound bites and translating them to Spanish or vice versa, I was like, wow, this would be revolutionary. But obviously there's a lot of journalism and ethics and concerns around it yet, but absolutely, I think that might be the future at some point. Pete, you're onto something.
I'm jumping ahead to my last questions about the future. So that's all great. So what about when you're on deadline, right? Like, as you know, with broadcast, certainly with online, you're just like, I need someone not tomorrow, not even tonight. I need someone in the next couple of hours, or it's just not going to work for this story. How does that, does an expert sort of say I'm available on short deadlines? Is that how that works? Or, and is it just a matter of like, you just get your list and you just got to blast out your emails? Is there any filtering, I guess, going on there?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there's two ways to answer this question. We're trying to do two things at the same time. Number one, we're trying to make sure that everyone on the platform is responsive to journalists. That is a huge barrier that I can't tell you how helpful it is as a broadcast journalist to just have people respond to me and say, hey, I'm about to go into court, like I can't give you this interview. Hey, I'm about to take a patient consult right now, look for someone else. Even that just gets me like 80% of the way there, because I can quickly scratch people off my list and move on to the next one. And so the idea is that the folks on Rolli are very responsive to journalists, and we've actually included a calendar and a schedule within the profiles and within the expert accounts. They can block out chunks of time so journalists are not reaching out to them when they're mostly unavailable, whether that may be the weekend or whether that may be particular chunks of time during the day, maybe when they're teaching lab or teaching a particular class. And so that helps us get closer to identifying those experts. Because let me just, and I think, Pete, I'd love at some point to talk a little bit about the problems that have led us to this point. But some of the issues that we have been encountering for so long as journalists is, let's say I need a lawyer. I go into Google and I type in, criminal defense attorney, and I just start calling every random lawyer that I see to see which one picks up first. And that's just not necessarily the best way to find who I need. And it's a huge waste of time. And so this helps me get 80% of the way there. But we also recognize that journalists are doing so many other things besides trying to book. And they oftentimes do need a lot of help with that kind of last mile. And so what we've actually do within Rolli is that we have a booking assistant program. And it's essentially a booking form that any journalist at any station or outlet can fill out at any point and tell us what they're looking for, what their deadline is, and we will go out and do that search for you and try to get someone for you by your deadline. And so you don't need to be out there on an island doing all this tough work by yourself. Rolli will come and support you and our resources will try to find that expert for you, and we soft avail them to make sure that when we turn them over to you, this is someone who's actually available for the window of time that you're looking for.
Yeah, and I feel like one of the big advantages of getting experts through a platform like yours is that you don't have to, as a journalist, do that default level of educating the person on how journalism works. And I would not sure what your sort of onboarding process is with with experts, but it's a little bit like, not necessarily defining things like off the record and stuff, although that would help. But it is like, like just the deadline thing alone. Often I'd reach out to experts like, yeah, I've got some time next week. It's like, no. That's not what this is. We're doing this now. We're not doing it at all. And just kind of figuring out like, I need shorter answers. I need accessibility via text or whatever, like this. Yeah. This kind of thing, you want a certain amount of media savviness, and you'll find people like that, but it's a little, a bit of a grab bag if you don't have someone already sort of doing some filtering and perhaps some education as well, which I imagine is a part of sort of getting onboarded to your platform.
Yeah, that's absolutely right, Pete. I think one of the barriers of getting world-class expertise into the public, into our homes, talking to journalists, is that a lot of these experts, they don't have experience working with the media. And some of them might be a little camera shy or not want to say the wrong thing or not really understand the motive of the journalist. So what Rolli does as part of the onboarding process is also offer media training. We have a lot of world-class, amazing experts and researchers who have never done an interview and may never do an interview if they don't feel comfortable with the process. So we have a team of Emmy Award-winning media trainers that help the journalists explain things like what is off the record, what is a SOT, what is a package, what do these words mean, how to have a good Skype interview, how to check your audio, how to make sure that your message is being heard loud and clear. So we offer them all of these trainings as well, so that by the time they arrive to the journalist, they know what to do, they know what to expect, and the journalist just gets a really great interview, usable sound bites, and gets an expert that understands the process so that the journalist doesn't need to spend valuable time explaining it to them.
Awesome. So I'd like to spend just a few minutes talking about the information tracer stuff you talked about. So can we just a quick refresher, like what is that for? How does it work? And also how does it compare to sort of existing tools out there? Obviously, like as I was sort of learning about it and you were describing it, thought about things like Data Miner, Storyful, et cetera. Mm-hmm. Tell me more about the information tracer.
Yeah, the potential for this tool is really really massive. But where we've started is by identifying that a lot of disinformation campaigns are inauthentically amplified, and what that means is that there'll be a network of actors around a piece of content that are engaging with it, retweeting it, resharing it, sometimes just copying and pasting the text and posting it from their own accounts. And the reason that a lot of this disinformation arrives into our homes, our parents, our friends, the reason it gets shared on WhatsApp is because there's folks behind the scenes making sure that we see that content. So what the information tracer does through a series of indicators is identify coordinated behavior. So we get data from all the social platforms, and we can then link coordinated behavior. We can say, okay, for example, there's a conspiracy theory out there right now that there's going to be a bird flu pandemic or epidemic right before the election. It's going to cause some upheaval. Well, our tool will tell you that 70% of the Twitter accounts that are tweeting about this were created after 2021. And that's one of the indicators that we give you. We give you indicators if the folks are talking about this beyond the normal range. So if Catalina's talking about climate change, within the normal range, what the normal average citizen does, but then you have someone who's talking about it 10 times the normal range, we flag that kind of behavior. So what the tool in essence does, it will flag behavior that'll tell the journalist, hey, the reason you're seeing this, it's not organic. Someone has inauthentically, or a group has inauthentically amplified this content so that it's reached you. So you might want to check into this a little bit more because the motives are a little unclear here. I think that we see a lot of bot farms, a lot of behaviors like this in different marketplaces, but it's especially dangerous for journalism because we want to make sure that we're giving folks accurate information. I think the second part of your question was, how does this compare to other tools?
Well, before we do that, I want to key in on something you were talking about. So one, is that the primary use case for the, like, just basically figuring out what's inauthentic versus not, and figuring out sort of, I guess, the best you can tell the origin around something like that.
Yeah. I think what we're seeing is a lot of concern and evidence that AI generated images or content, it's just multiplying in speed. We're seeing it fill up our feeds. That is the primary use case, because as the technology gets more advanced, it'll be very hard for us to tell whether an image is doctored or not, whether an image is real or not. But one of the best ways to see is by determining the provenance of that content. Who was the first person to tweet it? Who amplified it? What is the motive behind it? With the information tracer tool, we could tell who the first person to share a piece of content was. A great example of this was in Latin America during COVID. There was a hashtag that was being used to spread COVID disinformation. The hashtag was dictadura sanitaria, which literally means health dictatorship. With the information tracer tool, we're able to see not only who the first person to tweet that hashtag was, and it was in Chile. We could also see what the post was. And in this example, for example, we could see that the term was actually used on a physical banner at a protest, and then was basically captioned in the tweet. And then that tweet went from Latin America to Southern California, to the Iberian Peninsula in Spain, and then across the Caribbean. So we could really track the flow of disinformation, and in this case, from the physical world into the digital world. So it's really fascinating. You can spend hours on the tool just digging into that one use case of who was the original poster and how did this spread. There's obviously many secondary use cases. We've had news stations use the information tracer tool to find witnesses to news events, and other things that you can do when you have the wealth of all the social media data and the ability to parse through and make sense of that data. Our AI will even tell you the summary and the general sentiment of that post by reading over 100 examples. For you.
Now I've got a third thing to ask you about this, but you did touch on the second thing I wanted to ask, which is are you broadly seeing an increase in these kinds of issues with the rise of AI?
Mm-hmm. I think that's a really good question. I think the easy answer is yes. I think a lot of us we're expecting a a tsunami of AI generated content, but instead what we're seeing is content out of context a lot. So this happened a lot with the Ukraine war. This happens a lot with immigration, where you'll actually see real videos and real images of folks, storming an immigration checkpoint, but it's in Algeria. It's not in San
Right.
Antonio, or you'll see a war, but it'll be somewhere else, not in Ukraine, or it might have even been a video game. So we're seeing a lot of that kind of content. We are seeing AI generated content, of course. We have been seeing it, but I think today it's just as much of a challenge as tracking the intent and the provenance of real images that are being mislabeled or mischaracterized, and then misinforming.
Interesting. And you mentioned that you do use AI with the tool for things like, I guess, sentiment analysis. Can you describe exactly how you're using AI?
Absolutely. Yeah. Say you wake up one day and you check Twitter and you see that something is trending. Say, for example, Walmart is trending. Why is Walmart trending? And you go online and you say, what's going on with Walmart? What's figuring out here? Well, what our tool will actually do for this example and for any other search term that you're looking for is it'll read the top 100 to 500 posts on each platform pertaining to that topic. And then what it'll do, it'll give you a summary of why folks are talking about this specific topic. You might say, hey, Walmart has a great sale going on and people are gushing over $99 TVs. Or it'll tell you the sentiment is generally positive because people love saving money at Walmart. That's just an example. But what we try to do is try to make news gathering on social media at least 10 times faster than what it would if you were just trying to figure it out on your own. And I think that's a really useful tool for journalists who might be covering breaking news, or journalists that are trying to find news pegs. It's another powerful tool for making sense of this wild west that we call social media.
Yeah, and so now we can sort of loop it back around to the comparisons to other products. I mentioned Storyful, Data Miner. There's others I didn't mention. Obviously, there was CrowdTangle that went away, so there might be seems like there's a bit of an opportunity there for you guys and others. What are the main differentiators?
Yeah. I think there's a lot of great tools out there. I talk with the founders of a lot of these tools, and we all recognize to a certain extent we're all fighting the same fight and kind of on the same team trying to attack this from different angles. What I would say about a lot of the tools out there is that they're used to monitor brand reputation. They might want to have different indicators or filters that will allow a brand to really understand how a conversation is evolving online or how their brand is being spoken about online. These are the Meltwaters of the world and companies like that. And they have fantastic tech and they're wonderful companies. But what we've done at Rolli is made it purpose-built for journalists exactly. So the questions that our tool answers are specifically addressing the concerns that a journalist will want to know. So what are the related hashtags? Are there suspicious patterns? Who are the main amplifiers of this content? You can use Rolli to monitor your brand and to do all those things, but that's not the primary use case. So I think our main differentiator is that we're laser focused on the journalist use case and laser focused on allowing journalists to expose coordinated disinformation campaigns.
So it seems to me that both that tool and probably even the expert tool might even be competing not just with other services, but also AI itself to some extent, like broader AI. So it's kind of like, okay, expert tool, I really could, that's helpful, but I could also go to Perplexity, and ask like, who are some experts or do a kind of a research there. Now, again, I'm not saying it's the same experience, but I do feel like journalists are starting to go to things like ChatGPT or what have you at sort of the research phase for their stories and to find experts. What do you think of that? Do you sort of see AI as a competitor here? I can sort of see why your service is better, but you tell me why.
I think it all starts with a vetted data set. There's a saying, garbage in, garbage out, right? So if you have a controlled data set like we do, a vetted data set vetted by journalists, you know that the output is going to be a product of that vetted data set. What we don't have on the internet, what we don't have on Google or Bing is any vetting of the content. I can create any article. I could even invent an expert, optimize that page on SEO, and I'll get it to show up on page one over time. I think I want to update on the stat, but LinkedIn flags about 50 million inauthentic profiles a year. That was the latest count. It's some ungodly number.
They're all trying to sell you crypto.
Yeah, it's so it's great to use ChatGPT for research, but understand that the data set that it's working with isn't vetted. It's not always factual, and you will have hallucinations with a system like that as well. So I think our main differentiator when it comes to just using ChatGPT for something like that would be the vetting of the information that you're going to get.
I would just add one thing off of that. Going back to Google, we've had Google for many years, and it's an absolutely incredible tool. But one of the things that Google can't tell you is whether an expert is even interested in speaking with me as a journalist.
Right.
And right now, we're facing historic reduction of newsroom resources. So before, journalists used to have sometimes Booker and newsrooms that could help them do a lot of this work, help them make phone calls, help them connect with experts. Now we're not seeing that. Now we're seeing journalists having to do everything from pitching the idea to finding the experts, interviewing them, writing the stories, and then being live with the stories. More and more journalists are being asked to do up to 10 news stories a week now, so 2 a day. At the same time, we have the news cycle speeding up. So sometimes we have only 3 or 4 hours between the time that a story gets assigned to you as a journalist and then when you have to be live on air with that story. And so having a platform that I know I can turn to with folks that are excited and ready to pick up my call, that is a huge game changer for me. I do agree. I think that folks that have, they're maybe documentarians or they're working on these, they have a lot of time between projects. They have that luxury of returning to the outside world and saying, show me all the experts in the universe under this topic. But more and more as the news cycle speeds up and as resources are squeezed, I see the need for a product even more. And finally, I would just like to add on top of that I think we've come to this point because, in my opinion, the PR model is so broken. Public relations for such a long time has taken our information and has essentially sold it so people can pitch us as journalists. And before ChatGPT, I was getting maybe 40 or so pitches every single day. Now I'm getting closer to almost 100 pitches every single day. And it's become nearly impossible as I'm trying to do my job and my work to also keep my inbox under control. And I've always felt really frustrated by that because while I do think that there's some incredible individuals out there being put out, being identified, and being pitched to journalists through the pitching PR model of emails, I do think that what journalists really need is an easy way to identify these incredible experts and connect with them when it serves their purpose, when they're ready to work on a story that relates.
And maybe a pitch sorting tool would be maybe the next thing on Rolli's list. So I'm glad you brought up the reality today that media and journalism and newsrooms is not really having its best time. No. They're really struggling these days. A lot of publications, they're looking to get leaner, do more with less, echoing all over newsrooms, all over the place. So that seems to put you guys in a bit of a bind. Like, how do you sell newsrooms on your service and convince them of the ROI they're going to get from Rolli when they're basically cutting back.
Yeah, Pete, that's a great idea. A great comment. I used to get paid $20,000 in my first newsroom. I had a 4-year bachelor's degree from top university in the country, and my first job out, I was getting paid $20,000 a year. And I remember this really vividly. I remember going to one of the malls during one of my lunch breaks, and McDonald's was hiring, and they were actually paying more than what I was getting paid.
But the exposure.
It's a labor of love. It's a labor of love. And that's really what we've known from the beginning. Journalists do this because they love doing this. They love telling the stories of their community. They love being connected with people. They love to transmit information to the public. They feel like it's an important key part of our democracy, to be the watchdog. And so from the beginning, we've been very clear-eyed, and we've known that we were not going to set up any particular barriers when it came to charging journalists to join our platform. This is not the way for us to monetize or be sustainable. Of course, there's, a value behind our product, and we've been really fortunate to work with incredible organizations like the International Center for Journalists, the Roddenberry Foundation, as well as the American Public Media Group, and they provide essentially grants that allow all the journalists, all credentialed journalists, to join Rolli free of cost.
Nice.
And so we want to make sure that this tool is in the hands of all journalists possible, and we do not want to set up any type of barriers when it comes to that.
Yeah. So it becomes a very easy sell when you say, hey, this is a great piece of technology. It can help the efficiency and reliability of your news gathering. Oh, and it's free for your journalists. So, we're able to get a lot of journalists using the platform, and money is no object. So
money is no object. So what does that mean? How do you make money? How do you stay in business?
Yeah, that's a great question too. Sustainability is such an important thing right now. We see that our industry is suffering in a lot of different ways because our revenue models have not been able to keep up with technology and keep up with the way that people are now consuming news. And so from the beginning, we've known that we need to set up sustainable business models around anything we do if we want to provide this resource to journalists long term. So what we've essentially done is that organizations pay a low yearly subscription rate to join, and with that comes a service of we create a lot of their profiles for them, we optimize their profiles for them, we do check-ins with them, we provide media training for them as a way to help them stay current on the platform, as well as get that kind of training that makes them really great guests.
Yeah. And we also, aside from providing that level of service, that level of service might be very appealing for a large organization that has maybe 500 experts, but 2 people in the communications department. They don't have the time to create all those profiles. So what we basically provide them is a level of service that allows them to use the platform without having to hire more people themselves or to delegate other tasks that they would rather be doing. We also offer a free tier for experts. So we have amazing partnerships with expert organizations. One of the organizations we work with is the American College of National Security Leaders. These are highly vetted and experienced former generals, ministers, ambassadors, very high-ranking national security leaders. We believe in the free flow of information, so our partnership with them provides Rolli to them for free. And the ideal state is where we can have journalists using the platform for free, experts using the platform for free, and monetize off a level of service that allows us to be sustainable.
Nice. So let's project out a bit. What does Rolli and its role in the ecosystem look like in 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, as AI becomes more of a mediator between audiences and information, and maybe even journalists and the information they're trying to get? What does our system look like, and how can Rolli sort of make sure ends up looking healthy?
Yeah, I think this is a great question. We think about this every day. We talk about this. It's one of the topics that when we're eating or having meetings and we go down these rabbit holes, we talk, what's the future going to look like? And it's always a fun exercise. And I usually start the exercise by thinking about what it was in the past. And I remember when I worked in my first newsroom, I was at CNN in DC. I walked into my first control room. I felt like we were at NASA. I mean, we had satellites in the air, all these buttons, all these monitors, people around the world. Journalists were at the forefront of technology. And quite honestly, journalists have always been at the forefront of technology, going back to the printing press, radio transmissions, the first fax machines, all these technologies. These were media first technologies, and we were leading the way. Somewhere along the last 15 years, we've kind of lost our way and let technology happen to us. And it's been a very uncomfortable situation. But I still feel that technology is in the DNA of journalism, and we're going to adapt very quickly, where perhaps we haven't in the last 10 years or so, but I believe that we are. And what this looks like in the future is, I think AI is really going to empower the research and news gathering aspect of journalism, but you're never going to see AI replace the journalists in the protest getting sound bites. You're not going to see one of those DARPA robots interview a shopkeeper. Journalism and storytelling.
As cool as that picture is in my head.
As cool as it is in your head, I don't think the shopkeeper would be as comfortable telling their life story to a DARPA robot than they would to a member of their own community. And that's why storytelling and journalism will always belong to humans. But where I do think AI can really empower us, especially as we're losing resources and have to cover more and more, is in the research, in the analysis of vast amounts of data, in connecting dots that normally wouldn't be connected. And I think that's a really, really exciting world that journalists are going to be stepping into with AI tech.
Awesome. I think we can leave it there. Nick, Catalina, this has been a fascinating conversation. Thanks so much for the time.
Pete, thank you so very much. Really appreciate the time and the work that you're doing to get to tell the world about media AI and keep us all honest in the front lines of this fight.
Thank you, Pete.
Awesome. I'm excited to see where you guys take it. Thanks for listening to my conversation with Nick Toso and Catalina Villegas. If you want to check out Rolli, head on over to rollyapp.com. And if you liked what you heard, please just take a minute to leave a rating or review for the Media Copilot in your podcast app. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Media Copilot newsletter and check out mediacopilot.ai for our classes on AI for journalists, marketers, and content creators. Be seeing you in the future.